really kind of came to believe in Unitarianism probably a year to a year and a half before I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And I have told the seminary about that, and they're actually in the process right now of, considering revoking my degree or not. I think.
Wait, what?
Yes.
You can do this?
So, at the seminary, they have you sign a doctrinal statement, right? My pastor, we were talking, and so they said that we are no longer members, which I expected. I understand that. We don't agree with the doctrinal statement that you have to believe as a member there.
Mm-hmm.
So no surprises there. But, he said, we're not going to debate the Trinity. I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. Like, we don't want to, it's just a lunch get together. But he said, one of his things that he just kept repeating was that church history was on his side, basically. There's just so many people agree with him. And he just kind of just kept saying that. And and as well as I do, that's just a logical fallacy. Like, it doesn't matter how many people believe something, that doesn't make it true.
Yes, but it's also a very odd thing for a Protestant to say.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever's arguing with Martin Luther is going to be like, hey, man, I got church history on my side. I mean, just look around. Sometimes they would compare the doctrine of the Trinity to, the classical Roman Catholic view about transubstantiation.
Yeah.
Right? So after the priest says, this is my body and this is my blood, then this wafer is the whole body of a man, and this cup of wine is all of this man's blood.
Yep.
It's the same in all the other churches of the world on this Sunday.
We were going through the council of Chalcedon and Eutychianism. So, Eutychianism, it's this idea that you can mix the natures of Christ. So his God nature and his man nature become one nature. And they say, no, that's a heresy. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, so you can't mix his natures. Cool. I'm following along. And then they get to the Council of Chalcedon. And in that council, there's an interesting quote. And they say, his natures are indivisible. So you also can't divide his natures. You can't split them apart. And so my professor said, I still remember this clear as day. He was just like, you can't split them apart. You can't mix them. Jesus' two natures of fully God and fully man. They just stand side by side. And I was just like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean they stand side by side, but they're not separate? Like, I don't understand what you mean by that.
Huh. And
so I asked him, maybe it was the grace of God, but, God put on my heart this idea of, well, what do you do about Jesus' death on the cross? Because I've always heard, his man nature died or his flesh died, but his God nature didn't really die.
Which is what some of the church fathers say.
Yes, and I think I noticed even, you in your debate with Dr. Michael Brown, that's what he appealed to. He kind of appealed to the man nature dying, but he was really kind of vague about it.
At one point he said that Jesus didn't really die, and I was like, really, bro? But
yeah,
he didn't get in trouble for that, so.
Yeah, that was shocking to me. So anyways, that's the answer. I mean, these are top Trinitarian scholars. I mean, not only are they going against Chalcedon, but they're saying things that are just like clearly against the Bible. And so that was kind of shocking to me. So anyways, when I asked my professor this question, he just said it's a mystery. I said, you can't split apart the natures of Jesus, and we know God can't die. Did Jesus die on the cross? Like, what happened? Like, what happened on the cross, basically? And he just said, it's a mystery. And I was just, that to me, even as a full-blown Trinitarian, and I had no intentions of becoming a Unitarian, I just that stuck with me. And I just thought, how can we call this literally the central act of the Christian faith, Jesus' death and resurrection? how can we call that a mystery and say we don't really know what happened there? It's like, that to me, even as a full-blown Trinitarian, and I had no intentions of becoming a Unitarian, I just like, that stuck with me. And I just thought, how can we call this literally the central act of the Christian faith, Jesus' death and resurrection? How can we call that a mystery and say we don't really know what happened there? It's like the Bible seems to be very clear about what happened.
Yeah, no, it's very straightforward. He died. I mean, that's the person who died, but then that would be the same person as this eternal divine Son, who, if he's fully divine, wouldn't he be essentially immortal?
Yeah.
There's kind of a standard interpretation of Chalcedon or Chalcedon, however we want to say it.
Yeah.
Which I find in a lot of the recent scholarship, which is basically this council tells us what to say and what not to say, but it doesn't actually tell us how to think about it. Like, it's just, you can't say this, you can't say this. You have to sort of play in this sandbox.
Yeah.
But the actual content, like, we're not going to actually tell you. The things that you said, I mean, those are what a Chalcedonian person is supposed to say. But if you were to try to parse that into an actual view of the incarnation, you could get a whole bunch of different ones, right? All the ones that analytic theologians talk about, they all agree with those words, but they come up with these very different theories. For instance, the composite Christ, where, he's got two parts, or relative identity. They're all going to say that. So just saying that doesn't really tell you what to think. But yeah, you sure put your finger on like a really blazing obvious problem. If the one person there is the divine person, which is the view, then how can a divine person die? So they didn't say he tasted death or experienced death or any of these kind of weasel phrases. They just went straight for the mystery. Huh?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that professor in particular, he did appeal to mystery a lot. So, that was a very common thing. But it's funny how, they kind of couch it in a really positive light. Like it's such a beautiful mystery. And yes, some things about God we can't fully comprehend, his omniscience or how he could be immaterial. We don't really know what that's like. Mm-hmm. But to just couch like these very clear human things as mystery, I don't know. It's a really good technique, honestly, to keep people Trinitarians. But when you really start to question it, it's very, very annoying sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just a conversation stopper, isn't it? I mean, if it's a mystery, that means that in this life, at least, nobody's going to make sense of this. And so, therefore, you should stop trying to make sense of it.
Yes, absolutely. One of the comments that I've gotten as, we've kind of started telling people about Unitarianism and our belief, one of the most common answers we get is, you just don't have enough faith. Like you're trying to figure out everything. You just need to have faith. And it's just like, I don't know where this dichotomy came about of faith and logic. I'm not trying to be, unfaithful. I'm just trying to be logical and faithful. I don't think we have to throw away logic in order to have faith.
Yeah. I think it's the old canard about anybody who doesn't just go along with all of this is some kind of, rationalist who proudly refuses to believe things that he can't fully understand or fully explain or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I haven't really met any of those people among Unitarian Christians.
Yeah.
But I would have expected to before I knew this crowd, just because that's the lore,
I really kind of came to believe in Unitarianism probably a year to a year and a half before I graduated. Mm-hmm. And I have told the seminary about that, and they're actually in the process right now of, considering revoking my degree or not. I think.
Wait, what?
Yes.
You can do this?
So, at the seminary, they have you sign a doctrinal statement, right? So, I mean, we could get into a little bit of our thinking in this whole process, but me and my wife and thinking through what to do here, because it was a really unfortunate situation, right?
Yeah, you're deeply invested personally and financially, and
Yeah, we had already put in thousands and thousands of dollars in 2.5 years of studying. And, I had come to this belief truly just through studying the word and not, I wasn't enticed by some creepy guy who's like, hey, come become a Unitarian. No, I just studied the scriptures and I found that there was a huge flaw in Trinitarianism. And so I really didn't feel like I should drop out of seminary because of that.
hmm
And so, we finished, but I knew that DTS would disagree, and I know that, they're strongly Trinitarian and would not love the fact that they produced a biblical Unitarian graduate. So I went back and, told them the situation, and so they're considering revoking my degree. They're in the process of it right now. But it's just a really unfortunate situation too, I think, because some of my family and friends have already come at me with the accusation of, you're not qualified enough. I work as a Bible translator with Spirit and Truth right now for the REV Bible.
hmm
And they'll always come at me with, well, you're not qualified. You don't have a PhD by your name. And it's just really funny because at the same time that they're claiming that, they're saying, well, you deserve to get your degree revoked. And it's just like, you got to choose one or the other. Either I'm not qualified and,
Well,
you're happy with that, or I am qualified and you kind of have to just deal with that.
that's not much of an argument, hey, guess what? You're not qualified. Like, how qualified do you have to be?
Yeah. And
Why
that's what I
wouldn't
was,
this just shoot down any Protestant in the 1500s?
oh yeah.
Look, all the
Uh,
scholars are Catholic and Orthodox, and who are you, oh puny ordinary
yes.
man or person with a couple of degrees? Who are you to
Yes.
disagree with centuries of these wonderful patristic sources and stuff?
Um,
This is what shocked me when I started to look into it way back in like the late 90s. As a philosopher, you seek out the strongest arguments of all sides of a question. Say, if you believe in universals or not, or free will or not. You
yeah.
go read the best anti-free will guy you can find, then you read the free will guy, and then you just throw all the arguments in. You're like, may the strongest arguments win. This is how you
Yep.
pursue truth.
Yep.
And I was really shocked when I just, pick up theology textbooks and it's really got just poor or shallow or almost non-existent coverage of this whole aspect of the Reformation, not to mention ancient Christianity of various kinds. I was just shocked that they had become accustomed to just not hearing the other side. And
Yes.
part of the reason I was so shocked was I was learning that Trinitarians and Unitarians used to have very public debates. So, for instance, I found a book by the most famous American Unitarian pastor named Channing, where he was debating this very good biblical scholar named Moses Stewart. Very interesting book. So, why was it worth debating in, 1830 or whatever? And,
But not now.
in the 21st century, like suddenly this is just beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Were you afraid of just being a cultist, or have you been accused of that, just getting
Yeah.
sucked in somehow, some kind of evil system?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that was a big problem, as we were praying through and just kind of talking to each other and to other people about it was it's so, kind of surrounded in this idea that it's a cult. It's not just that you're changing your mind on a theological topic, you're becoming a cult member.
hmm
That was just a really difficult thing because we were just wrestling through, we truly believe this is true. Are there normal people? Like, let's go look into these organizations and see, are the people normal or are they cultish?
hmm
And, what we found was, yeah, they seem pretty reasonable and normal. Nobody's, saying, if you don't agree with us, you're going to be cast out. And so I actually reached out to Sean Finnegan And he did not answer, but Jerry answered.
His inbox probably looks like mine, it's a dumpster fire that
Yes. And I
stuff
totally
gets lost there every day. It's shameful. Talking about my own inbox, to be clear, but I'm guessing his is probably overflowing. But
yes, and we've laughed about it. But so Jerry answered. Anyways, in my conversations with Jerry, I'm exploring Unitarianism, and honestly, it was truly just the humility with which he approached like some of my questions, because I came at him with Philippians 2 and John 1, and I was just like, how are you understanding these passages? And he was like, here's my explanation, but honestly, these are pretty tough passages. Like, he's like, I'm going to be completely honest. Mm-hmm. It's not super clear. These aren't super clear passages.
That's exactly right. I don't think they're super clear for the Trinitarian either, though. They're just, they're one-off passages. They're hard for everybody.
Yeah, that's the classic one. I've actually walked through John 1:1 with quite a few of my friends and said, you think that it seems to be clearly teaching Trinitarianism. Mm-hmm. Let's walk through this real fast. And so I walked through them with the phrase in John 1:1b, the word was with God. So you think that's Jesus there, right? And they're like, yeah. And he was with God. Okay, who's God there? And they're like, the Father. Okay, I'm like, okay, cool. And then in John 1:1c, I say, okay, and then the Word was God. And then they say, oh, wait a second. So I'm like, so the Word was the Father. Modalism. And they're like, oh, wait a second. No, that's not what we really believe. So it's not, you're exactly right. It's not clear, even for the Trinitarian, as they like to think. And as they've been taught, it's such a, they'll throw it out there. The Word was God, and then no discussion, no like critical thinking. Mm. Yeah. My pastor, we were talking, and so they said that we are no longer members, which I expected. I understand that. We don't agree with the doctrinal statement that you have to believe as a member there. Mm-hmm. So no surprises there. But, he said, we're not going to debate the Trinity. I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. Like, we don't want to, it's just a lunch get together. But he said, one of his things that he just kept repeating was that church history was on his side, basically. There's just so many people agree with him. And he just kind of just kept saying that. And and as well as I do, that's just a logical fallacy. Like, it doesn't matter how many people believe something, that doesn't make it true.
Yes, but it's also a very odd thing for a Protestant to say.
I know, yeah. Yeah.
Whoever's arguing with Martin Luther is going to be like, hey, man, I got church history on my side. I mean, just look around. But, it seems to me, Johnny, that Protestants are really double-minded about this. So there is out there like the hard-nosed attitude, like is in the pseudo-Athanasian Creed, where just you're going to go to hell unless you believe all this creedal stuff about the Trinity. But then, if you talk to a more thoughtful apologist, like, I don't know, I think Rob Bowman thinks this, Dr. Robert M. Bowman Jr., they realize that, hey, when a kid, wants to be born again, or when somebody goes down the aisle at an evangelistic service or something, like, we just ask them like the real basics. Like, no one's asking them, do you think God is 3 in 1? Persons are homoousion,
Yeah. How do you feel about Chalcedon before they get baptized?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Do you agree there's 2 natures in one person in the composite Christ? It just doesn't come up. So, okay, but they realize that, right? And they don't think this 8-year-old kid is going to hell because he doesn't know this, because no one told him, right?
Yep.
So then they switch, like, okay, well, that can't be right. Okay, but it's got to be some kind of disqualifier. So then they come up with something that's not in the tradition, which is that, it's not in the Athanasian Creed anyway. They say you can't like knowingly deny it. Like, once you're informed, then then you're going to hell. Like,
I've heard, but it's like, is that not just a complete illogical move to say something is a requirement for salvation, but these kids did not have it when they believed? They did not understand the Trinity when they believed.
Yeah.
But you're calling that a requirement still. You're still saying it's a requirement for salvation. But if you hear about it and deny it, then that's when it becomes, it's like, wait, what do you mean if it's a requirement?
Well, yes. No, you've put your finger on a tremendous problem. And I think the famous early modern subordinationist Unitarian Samuel Clarke discusses it, I think, in the intro to his book, The Scripture Doctrine of the Trinity. You can't make a contract that says, to be in the club, you have to do ABC or believe ABC. And now once you're in, you have to believe A, B, C, D, E, F. Like, you can't like pull this switcheroo. A contract is a contract.
Yes, exactly.
And he also makes the point that it's not up to us to change the terms of this covenant either. But anyway, the terms you come in under are the terms that you must continue to satisfy to be in, right? Otherwise, there's this weird switcheroo, which there's no justification for it.
There's really essentially two different ways of salvation. You're saying, yeah, there's a way of salvation for an 8-year-old. They don't have to believe in the Trinity. But if you're a 20-year-old and you've heard about the Trinity, then there's a whole different path of salvation for you. It's like, what? Like, where is that in the Bible?
Well, it counsels ignorance, right? Because if you're uninformed, then it doesn't matter if you don't believe this stuff. But the second that you're informed, now you have this ironclad duty to believe it or you're going to hell. So the smart thing to do would be, especially if it's a difficult subject, and it is, the smart thing to do is to stay uninformed.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I think is part of the reason why a lot of people do that. Like, they just think no good can become of this, not only socially, but as far as my salvation. Like, if I don't think about it, I won't have a heretical view.
Yep.
And I can just muddle my way through to the kingdom with these confusions, basically.
Yeah, and that promotes what? It promotes people that don't actually want to study the Bible, because it's like you when you just promote this idea of mystery, or you promote this idea that, the more you look into it, the more confusing it gets. It doesn't encourage people to want to walk with God. And so I think it's a hurtful thing.
Yeah. There's a bit of idolatry, the church history is on my side kind of attitude. I mean, it goes hand in hand with the, how could so many capital G, great capital M men, have thought, how on earth could a person disagree with Augustine or Aquinas or Calvin? Like, I mean, my view, I look at these guys like I look at historical philosophers. They're just people.
Yep.
They're insightful on some topics, and they're all full of beans on other topics.
Yep.
And there's good things about them, and there's sometimes very tragic aspects to their character. Like Luther and his raging anti-Semitism, for instance, or Calvin's whole personality. But I exaggerate a little bit. He had good points in his personality, but they're just people. Like, you shouldn't idolize them and think that they're these towering pillars of insight that you just couldn't possibly disagree with.
Yep, absolutely.
Calvin somewhere kicks around that silly old quotation. It comes from one of the Gregories. I can't remember, maybe Gregory of Nazianzus. It's like, as soon as I think about the oneness, then I'm thinking about the threeness, and then I'm back to the oneness. Right? And it sounds so profound, and then you're like, he's just confused.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody busts that out, like this profound, pearls of wisdom, I'm like, okay, they're not really thinking very clearly about this stuff.
Yeah, that's my Trinity professor. He really did emphasize the profound and, mystery. He really believed it. I don't think he's trying to be deceitful, but yeah, it's just, really think about, what are you saying? What are you teaching?
The old school Protestants back in the 1700s, sometimes they would compare the doctrine of the Trinity to, the classical Roman Catholic view about transubstantiation.
Yeah.
Right? So after the priest says, this is my body and this is my blood, then this wafer is the whole body of a man, and this cup of wine is all of this man's blood. Yep. It's the same in all the other churches of the world on this Sunday. I mean, like, don't we just know this is false just by looking at it and tasting it and stuff? Like,
yeah,
it looks like it's the testimony of Mother Church against this mountain of evidence that we have from our senses.
Yes.
You're kind of imposing on, it's like you're trying to pull one over on us. Come on, like, you're treating us like we can't just see what this is, smell it, taste it, touch it, etc. There's something similar going on. You're treating us like we can't think about this. Absolutely. Like, we don't see the contradictions, or we don't see the problems.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There's been, that kind of idea that reality doesn't really have to line up with our faith. It's made its way into so many doctrines. So I would say, some of the main ones would be like soul sleep or something. The idea that when you die, your spirit goes to be with God, your body stays here. So really, like, the body doesn't really matter because, you get to go be with God in your spirit. And then, so, that doesn't really line up with reality because in reality, you have dead bodies lying in the ground. Then you have transubstantiation, another great point. Like, it doesn't really line up with reality. Jesus didn't say, this is my body and my blood, and then he cut off his arm. He didn't do that. He didn't even, so even the very first people eating the Lord's Supper did not eat the true body and blood of Christ. So I don't know why we would think that 2,000 years later, we actually are eating the true body and blood of Christ.
Yeah, they have their proof text and they have their authority. He says, this is my body. And he says, like, don't you believe Jesus? And
yeah,
how could Thomas Aquinas be wrong? He's such a great man. It's very similar.
Yeah.